Hi, I'm Jill and welcome back to my channel. Today, this is the tutorial for my Pintly Pack. I've had so much fun in designing this. I made this bag about 2 years ago for my daughter. It didn't have the covered zip, but it was pretty much this bag. So this is the simple version. This is the regular. Now this is both of the regular size. There is a large size as well. This is the standard strap setup. You've got your pockets in the back and in the front. And you've got a large phone pocket in the middle. And inside, if you make it how it is in the back pattern, you have got a divider pocket and a big slip pocket. And that is the same for the simple. If you just want to have a slip pocket, then that's easy. You can mix and match all the features of this bag. So on the simple, you've just got the covered zipper pocket in there, and you have got no pockets on the back, but you've got fixed straps, which makes it really easy, really simple and really quick. And you've got the grab handle on the back as opposed to the grab handle on the top for the regular. So the regular is designed to be a convertible, can be a crossbody or a pack. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking because this is a tutorial. So I'm going to run through how to make this bag now. I'm not going to go through how to make this simple. You do this the same way as I will show you how to do the covered zipper in there. And then you have got the fixed strap system, which is pretty standard in the pattern. But I'm sure if enough people ask for it, I will do a tutorial for that. And I haven't even finished sewing my straps. So that's Pintly. So let's get on and sew her tutorial now. So this is everything we're going to need to make our height. Now I am making the regular one with a covered zip on the top, and you can make a standard zip and you can make the simple version as well. So let's quickly run through what we've got. We've got our A1, 2, 3 and 4 and my tag. So the A1 and 2 are basically parts of the front. So if you're cutting it out of a fussy cut, what you can do is cut that as one piece using the A4 piece and cut down the middle. So I have got 2 lining and 2 exterior of both of those, and then the A4, which is the pocket lining. I've got 2 linings of that. The top, I've got 2 exterior only. We have got our gusset. I have got 2 exterior. I'm using this waxed canvas, and because it's waxed, I can't put anything on the back. So with my lining, I've interfaced and I've also put a very thin fleece on my lining. Normally I would put it on my exterior, but it doesn't work very well with the waxed canvas. We've got our base. Now I'm using the vinyl, and so you could, in fact, I might put some Decavil light on that, but this is a really good weight. So if you're using anything lighter, I do suggest putting Decavil light on the base outside of all the seam allowances. So then we have got slip pocket, the 3D slip pocket. I've got 2 of those interfaced. The front pocket, the E, I've got 2, one exterior and one in lining, which I've interfaced, and the trim, the E trim, that goes on top of the inside pocket. In my linings, again, I've put the fleece in the middle of those out of the seam allowances. Now, normally I would put the fleece, as I said, on my exterior, but with waxed canvas, that's a little bit tricky and I don't want to start trying to glue it. So I'm using contrast for my G2, my strap loops and my base loops. So I have got those cut out of my vinyl. My handle I've got cut out of my contrast. And my flap. Now my flap, I am doing the back of the flap, which would be the lining, out of canvas. But normally that would be the lining. So then we've got our zipper. Now you've got your D1 and your D2. So you've got a zipper front and zipper back. Now it's slightly curved, and that is the side that goes to the exterior. The zipper's on the flat. So again, I've got my exterior and my lining with the fleece. So this is your back zipper. If you're wanting to do it as a standard zip without the cover, you would fold it at that blue line and cut both your pieces at that. So because I'm doing a covered zip, I've cut my lining like that, and my exterior I've cut completely full. So again, if you're doing a standard zip, cut them both folded. If you're doing the zipper cover, cut your exterior the full length and your lining to the mark. So that's our zipper back. So that is everything we need as far as our fabric. Because I'm doing 2 side pockets and the top, I need about 1 meter of zip. I'm using a large D-ring on the back instead of a rectangle ring, and it gives you a few more options as the strap. I'm using the rectangles on the bottom because I'm going to use swivel clips. Got my logo tag, some rivets, 2 swivel hooks, D-rings for the handle for the top. Now I've got 2, I only really need 1. I don't know why I've got 2, because I'm doing the 1 long strap. Oh, maybe I hadn't decided whether I was doing the 1 strap or 2, which I can think about. I've got a magnetic style rivet one. So the magnetic snap that goes on the pocket, I'm using a rivet style. So it's going to have that on the back. So I'll show you where you would put a normal one going through and 4 zipper pulls. So there was lots of options for your straps, and the different options would depend on what you do with the hardware. If you're doing the simple straps, you don't need any of that, but you would need 2 of the sliders and 2 swivels for the standard strap. So that's everything we need. Let's go through and make our height now. So we're going to start with our body, A1 and A2. Now there is a little bit of a trick here. Now let's discuss this. Depending on which side you want your zip to be on. Now, if you cut it with both the fabrics the right side up, then they are going to be on the same side. So they will be on the left side of the bag, looking at the bag, or the right when it's being worn. If you're wanting one on one side and one on the other, then cut them paired like I have here. So I've cut those mirrored. What I would normally do is use double-sided tape or a glue stick. So I would put that on the edge of my zipper. So I'll put that on anyway and see how it goes. And I'll put it on both sides. So we are going to do both of these the same, but because one is reversed, it will just be on the other side. But the construction is exactly the same. It's much easier if you use a fabric that's got a very definite right and wrong side. So just press that down onto your double-sided tape. So that will be right sides together. So your exterior and your zip are right sides together. Turn it over and put your lining right sides down over the top. So you're lining up the ends there, and so your fabrics will be right side together, sandwiching the zip. So we'll try a little bit more. See, the double-sided tape is not sticking to my waxed canvas, but it will stick to my lining. I am using 1/4 inch or 3mm double-sided tape. That way, when we sew it with a generous 6mm seam allowance, it does not get in our seam. So because that's not going to stick very well, I'm just going to put a couple of clips on that to keep it in place. So I will do one and then carry on with the other. So I'm going to sew down that seam as a generous 6mm. So that's sewn like that. So then we just want to open that out. So this is the first full bag project I'm doing on my HD9. I bought a new Janome HD9 sewing machine and I'm absolutely loving that. So we want to pressure those out to be equal and put a clip. So bring them up to meet at the back and clip around the edge. Just top stitch down there. So that's one side done. So I'll continue with this other side. So I'll pop that aside and I'll do that off camera. So now we want to take our matching, so I'm going to put that down over the other side. So we're going to line up the edge here. So at the bottom, we want to have that lining up, and at the top, we want it lining up. So again, zipper and exterior right side together. Turn it over and add our lining over the back. So that's dropped back a bit. Let's put some pins in it. Loving these little clips. They are absolutely brilliant. Now they are available on my website in New Zealand, and from A Passion of Vinyl in Australia. These little clips, they're just gorgeous. So, and we're going to do the same. Sew down there at a generous 6, open them both up like that, and top stitch down there. So we'll go and do that now. And so that's what we've got. Our lining all matches up, and our top and bottom. In fact, it could be raised up just a little bit more. So now we'll put our zipper pull on. Now we want to put it on from the bottom. The reason we want to do that is we want it closing towards the top. So if you can see, that one was over the top. So I want to put that one in there first. Now it's much easier to come from a real angle like that. If you try and do it straight, it just won't go in. Bring it to halfway, and then just tack across the belt top and bottom so that the zip can't come undone. Right, so that's one. So I'll do this one off camera. So there are my 2 front bodies. As you can see, I cut them mirrored, and so it gives me a zip on the opposite sides. If you're wanting them both on the left side, you want to cut it with the fabric facing up for both. If you're wanting on the right, cut it with on the wrong side of the fabric facing up. So we'll put those aside for now, and we shall get our slip pocket. If you're using a logo tag, you want to center it. So let's mark our centers. Everything should be marked anyway. With using this, I can just put a mark in it. So we're coming up 1 inch from the bottom and centered. So I'm just going to mark that there, and that's where I'm going to put my tag. The other thing we want to do at this point is do the magnetic snap 1 inch down from the top. Now I am using a rivet style, and that is my center point for that. Now I always suggest putting some Decaville Heavy or Decaville Light behind your tags. Now I'm going to be putting a bit of Decaville Heavy. I'm just going to use a glue stick because it will actually be held in by the rivet. So I'm just going to put that on the back. So as you can see, I've put my logo tag on, and I have only cut my hole. Because I'm using a rivet style, it will go in there, but we want to do that after we've done our top stitching. And normally it's meant to be a 14mm, but I don't have these in a 14, so we'll see if the 18mm fits. So what we're going to do now, even with our tag on, is fold that in half and sew down there at the required seam allowance, like that. So then we want to open that seam out nice and flat. Now if you're using a fabric you can press, I suggest you do that now. If not, just finger press it or do what you can with it. So then we're going to turn it so that that matches up with our center line. So it's in the middle and matching up with our center line like that. Let's put a clip on there so that it's definitely going to be. So make sure you've got your tag at the bottom, and we want to sew across the top. The other thing I recommend doing, even though this is a thin pocket, I also recommend doing it with any fabric, is putting something over the back of your logo tag, etc. Right, so I've also cut a square of fleece. So then we're going to trim our corners, and we're going to turn this right side out. So now we're going to top stitch across the top. So this is where you would reach in here and install your magnetic snap. Now that you've top stitched it, everything's going to be out the way. So an 18mm is a little bit overkill for a pocket like this, but these don't come in a 14. Well, they might do. Maybe I need to look into that and see if I can get smaller ones. So that is our front pocket. So we want to retrieve our front. Make sure it's all out flat. Put that on that side. Now if you've got the zip or determined to put the zip on the other side, then it would be on this side. And we've got 1/2 inch from the edge of the zip like that. Now you can either put double-sided tape or you can just hold it in place. Now we are going to be sewing through all the layers. Now the reason I want you to do that is because it gives it a bit of strength for the pocket. You're not just attaching it to the exterior, you're actually sewing it through the lining as well. So we're going to sew down here. I'm going to sew along and back, and make sure you do a back stitch really well at the top and bottom. So that is our pocket. Now the other thing you can do is put a rivet, a small rivet, right at the sides there if you want. I really like the look, and so I tend to do that on all of mine. So you can see I've put the hole right in the corner by the stitching, but I haven't cut the stitching because you don't want it to cut the stitching and you don't want it too far in because you don't want the pocket to become too much smaller. So put your rivets in there and we shall press those and carry on. So that's our pocket all ready to go. So now we shall work on our flap. Put that right sides together. And we want to sew around the curved edge, leaving the straight edge open. But if you've got going around the curve, just one stitch, lift your foot and keep adjusting it to get a nice clean curve around there. So again, around the edge, outside edge, leaving this edge open at the required seam allowance. So that's all sewn around the edge. Now what I tend to do is just trim the, oh, I've got some nesting there, just trim around the curve with pinking shears, like so. So then we want to turn that through. So push your seams right out. And this is where your turning stick is really handy, just to put some pressure on your seams. Now I'm going to purposely leave a little bit of peek through on the side of my seam. So I'm going to top stitch around there before I then fit my magnetic snap. So you should have already cut on the mark here, and as I said, I'm putting a rivet style in, so you should have already cut your holes there for your magnetic snap. So we will now top stitch around the side of that. So that is all top stitched. So now reach in and fit your magnetic snap. So that's got its magnetic snap in. So what we'll do now is retrieve our front that we've got our do up your snap. So we want to now, there should be a slight flex in that pocket, ever so slightly. So clip along the top, because by the time you put something in that pocket, you want it to still snap shut. So we'll clip that in place. We want to find our A3, which is our top, and we want to place that along the top like that. So you can see where it's even. We also want to get a pocket lining and put that right side up behind it, so that when you open your pocket, you've got the lining in there. So you can either do this before you've attached the flap or do it all together. So make sure all the edges line up and along the bottom lines up. So just slide that into the clips you've got there before. Now we're just doing this on the front because on the back we want to put some other bits in there as well. So up here, or baste up the side, sew across the top and baste down that side as well. So now we want to push that up the top like that and top stitch along the top with the given seam allowance. Right, and then we just want to trim those side pieces off. That's on a bit crooked, isn't it? So anything above the top, trim at the sides like that. And that is our front. So I'll do the pocket on the back and then get it to like this, and then I'll come and show you what we want to do next. Perfect. So now we want to retrieve our back, our other back lining, our ring, rectangle or whatever we're using for our strap loop and our triangles or whatever we're using for our base loops. So let's put that aside for now. So we want to get our strap loop and our base loops. Now the strap loop, I'm cutting at half the width on the pattern because I'm going to keep a raw edge. So I'm going to put some double-sided tape down the middle and put a piece of Deckerville Light down the center. Then I'm going to put another piece of double-sided tape over the top and fold it into the middle. Now if you're using fraying fabric, you would want to have this as a double fold. So fold that over into the middle. So this is going to be tight on the loop, so it's not going to fray and you're not going to see it at all, but I don't want it too thick. That's going to be through there like that, but we are going to stitch down the ends, so I'll just keep that there for now. And so I'm doing the same with my base loops. I'm going to put a piece of double-sided tape down the middle for my Deckerville Light. And again, if you're using fraying fabric, you would have this double width. Fold those over the Deckerville into the middle, so it meets like that. Again, we're going to sew down the edges of those. And you definitely want to have something strengthening these, whether it's Deckerville Light, whether it's just a couple of layers of interfacing. If you're doing a double fold, interfacing is probably enough. This vinyl has a bit of give, so I want to make sure it's definitely not going to stretch or rip. So now we're going to top stitch down all the sides of those, so all of them. So those all top stitched. We're going to thread one of our triangle loops through each of those. Like that. So what we're going to do now is get our back, mark our centers. That's going to be down facing that way. Now I'm going to baste along the bottom of those just to keep them in place. So what we've got is our two base loops and our strap loop. Now if you've got one side that you prefer over the other, you want to put that down over the center. Now we want about 1/2 inch above it. Make sure it's level. And these we want to have right sides together facing up over the top. So in from the end about 1 inch and have 1/2 inch hanging over the side like that. Now if this is going to be too thick for your machine over the base, you can put them on later and about 1/2 inch overhanging at the bottom. So now I'm going to baste across there and across there. So that is what you've got, both right sides together over your back. Now you want to put your lining, put that on your lining. And you can baste down the sides. So again, the lining is right sides together and I've just basted down the side. So what you want to do is make sure that's down and they're up. Find our other top and just like we did on the front, do along the top. Now this is going to be thick in here, so make sure you use a hump jumper and hand crank it if you need to. So we're going to sew across there. So that's like that. Now what we're going to do is get a bit tricky. We are going to cut, so get your scissors in between there and just cut into there. So you're not cutting this side, just the lining. So you're cutting right down next to that, but not that, because what we're going to do is put that up, flip that down like that, so that that seam allowance is up at the back. That's what you've got, so that we can top stitch along here. Now this is going to be thick, and again, hand crank it, or if your machine can't, pull it back like that and top stitch behind it. So you're just top stitching that side and that side. So if you can pull that down and get in next to it, then do that, but ideally you want to go across the top. So now we also, if your machine will allow, put a row of stitching right up under here. Now I also suggest in doing this, if you've got nothing like I have, if you've got no interfacing anything on, put a bit of Deckerville light in behind that. So I'm just going to glue a piece in behind there. Now normally you would have interfacing on this piece, but because I'm using waxed canvas, it's a little bit difficult. You just don't want too much pressure on this piece of fabric. So I'm going to top stitch as close to under this rectangle as I can, and then put a couple of rivets underneath. So that is what you've got. You've got your top stitching around there and your 2 rivets. So that is really secure, and it's not just pulling on one part of the bag. So you want to make sure that folds down while you sew this, so you can put a piece of tape or something over the top if you want, and I'd move the zip up a little bit. So now we want to get our base. So that's our back all completed. Now we want to get our base. Now I've got my Deckerville light out of the seam allowance here, so I'm going to put that right sides together with the bottom and just clip along the bottom. Now, as I said, if this is too thick for you to sew over, you can put these in the side seams, and the instructions to do that are in the pattern. So just make sure your lining is down at the back as well. Now we want to sew along there at the seam allowance given in the pattern. Make sure that your D-rings are down out of the way. Okay, so I'm definitely giving my HD9 a workout. So then we want to just fold that down and top stitch along the base. So that did that really well because that is thick. Okay, so that is our back. We then want to get our front that we did earlier and put that right sides together over the bottom of the base and do exactly the same. And of course this is much thinner because it doesn't have any straps or anything in it. So we're going to sew down there with the given seam allowance, open it up, and again top stitch over the base. So that is our exterior all done. So now we should put that aside while we work on our lining. So we're going to start with our 3D pocket. So we're going to put that right sides together, and we're going to sew completely around the edge, leaving a turning gap in the middle. So I'm just going to draw a line there. So I'm going to start sewing here, keeping it on the angle all the way around, away from all the edges, and stopping there. Right, so now we want to cut our corners. So snip off your corners there and cut right into that there, but do not cut your stitch. Let's do that on all your corners. Like that. So that it's nice and flat along the bottom. Now, if you're using fabric you can iron or press, it would help if you press this because you want your seam definitely flat down the sides. You want to retrieve one of your linings. But before we attach it, we want to top stitch along the top. And I'm just going to top stitch across the top. So we want to lie that on there. We want to come up a distance here and a distance in this side. Now you can put double-sided tape around here if it makes it easier to hold it in place. You can use pins or you can use clips, whatever works for you. So we're coming up 3 1/4 and in 3/4 of an inch. So we wanted to sew just down there. So we've back stitched well at the top and the bottom. So keeping it straight at the top, we want to flex that up so that we can get it the same distance on this side. So now we want to stitch down this edge here. So that looks all a bit odd at the moment, but that's right. So now what we want to do is pull this up like that. So the corners are folded up so that you can get that in between the two corners on the outside like that. So you're stitching it from there across to there. So these corners are sitting next to it, but they're not going to be sewn, they're going to be left open like that. So if you've got tape or something, or if you want to pin, you can. So you're just sewing from there across to there, and keep your turning gap sewn or turned under. Now if you want to, you can flatten this and press it so that it presses as a 3D pocket like that. So just fold over on those lines and press that. Give that a bit of a press so that it's actually going to be a 3D pocket like that in your bag. So that's that side done. We'll put that aside for now. So now we've got our other e-pocket, which is our slip pocket. We're going to fold that together and sew down the side here only. So like we did the front pocket, we want to fold that seam open and line that up with your center there. And with the center at the bottom. And again, if you can press this, do so. And now we're just going to sew across the bottom only. Give your corners a trim. And if it's uneven like mine is, give it a bit of a trim. With that seam open, we're going to turn it through the right way. And just baste across the top. Now, if your machine doesn't like double-sided tape, put some thinner version of double-sided tape, not thick like mine, because I'll definitely be sewing through this. So if you've just got a bit in the top, that's or in the middle, that's fine. Because what we're going to do, so we're going to sit this to be less than halfway onto the pocket like that and close that down and fold that over so that your sides should meet, starting on the inside of the pocket and finishing on the inside of the pocket, because we're going to trim these pieces off later. So what you want to do is just run your scissors right up against the side of your pocket and just snip there. Do not cut your stitching. And that is our other pocket. So get our other lining. Now we want to place that so that it's 2 3/4 up from the bottom. And we want it centered. So what we're going to do now is stitch down there, along there, and back up to the top, keeping it nice and centered and in place. So now we want to retrieve our other lining, put it right sides together, lining up the bottom. And sew along the bottom at the allotted seam allowance. And then we want to open up that seam and butterfly it. So that means opening the seam and sewing down either side of it. So that's butterflied. As you can see, I've sewn on either side of the seam. You can possibly see it there better. So that is our lining. Now at this stage, if you want to do a double check, both got them the same size, you can do a double check like that, and they should match perfectly like that. So what we want to do is determine if we want this pocket at the back or the front. Now I prefer it at the back because there's less room to get things out. So I turn the back over at that top and place that directly on that. So when it's shut, that's going to be at the back. So now we just want to clip our way around that, lining up all our edges. and we want to clip around the edge. Make sure everything's in place. Because you've got pockets at the back, it doesn't sometimes sit flat, so you need to kind of coax it to sit in the right place. As long as it's level around the edge, that will be fine. So now we're just going to baste around the outside edge, keeping everything in place. So that is all basted together. Now, if you've got any fraying edges or any overhang of interfacing, etc., just trim that off, but you want to keep the shape of your bag, so don't worry about that. So we'll just put that aside for now. So next we're going to work on our handle. Now we have got that cut at length. I've drawn a line down the middle. You will need a air erasable marker or a marker that wipes off. Some double-sided tape is very useful, and your 2D rings if you're adding the option to add a crossbody strap to it. If you're not adding a crossbody strap to it, you can just do the handle without it. So put double-sided tape over the top of your line, and we're just going to make this the same as we did with our base loops and strap loop back at the beginning. We're going to fold that over into the middle. Now this is going to be double fold because it is definitely going to be seen, whereas the base and strap connectors for our fraying or non-fray, we didn't do the double fold. So this needs to be a double fold. So just so that it doesn't quite reach, I've just left a tiny gap, maybe just under 1 mil or about 1 mil. Just helps the turn to have a small gap because your edges aren't fighting each other. I like to put a piece of double-sided tape down the middle, and I'm using a 10 mil because it will be out of my seam allowances, and I don't want the glue or the tape to be in my needle. So all we're going to do now is fold that up and bring our edges together. Like that. Now you can clip those together if you want. Another beauty of these little clips is they do not mark your vinyl. While they may appear to leave a small mark, it's gone within seconds. So what we're going to do now is stitch or top stitch I'm going to do it all the way around. It's just easier to go around the edges as well. So we'll go and do that. So now we're going to draw some lines. So we're going to go 4 and 5 from the ends. Now I'm going to do it on both sides because I want to put a piece of double-sided tape to attach that to the bag. So we're going 4 and 5. So on the wrong side, we want to put some double-sided tape from the end, actually a little bit short of the end because we don't want to sew over that. So just in between, and we'll put that aside for now. So let's retrieve our D1 and our D2 and our zip. We will need our zipper pulls as well. Right, so what we're going to do to start with is start on our 2 front pieces. So we'll just put our back up there for now. So as this has got a slight curve, we're working on the flat edge. And I'm going to put a bit of double-sided tape along the edge of my zip. Now again, you don't have to use double-sided tape. You can just baste it on. You can do whatever works for you. I use the 3 mil, as I mentioned before, because it doesn't then get in my seam. So we're putting that right sides down on the flat edge of the front. And then, like our zipper we did before, I'm going to put more double-sided tape across the back. And then we're going to put the straight edge of our lining. So your edges should meet up. So you've got your fabrics right sides together, and that's not going to hold, that tape. So the more time you take in getting these level, the better your zip's going to look. So now we're just going to sew down there at a generous 6mm. So I just sewed that on my top stitch length, so I had to re-sew it. So I'll just trim those down a little bit because we don't need that extra on there at the moment. So then we just want to open that out, push it away from our seam. Oh, my centres aren't marked. It's always good to have your centres marked for things like this so that you know what you're lining up. Now, if you're using something thicker, this can be quite tough on your hands. Make sure you get it nicely back smooth. Right, so what we're going to do is top stitch down the zipper edge. So now we're going to do something that's a little bit different. Now, if you're wanting to do a standard zip, you would have cut both of these at this size, but because I'm doing the zipper cover to show you how that's done. Right, so we're wanting to draw 2 lines. If I do it that way, I'll be able to see it. First one at 1 and an 1/8. Just going to lightly score that. And the next one at 2 from the edge. So again, if you're using double-sided tape, put that along there. So the lines, the ones with the closest to the lines is what goes against there. So we're going to go, actually we'll put it this way so you can see it. We're going to flip that over and put it against there. And you do want to line up your edges. Turn that over so you can see it. So what we're doing is we've got the lines there, so we're doing it against that. Again, we're going to turn it over, put some double-sided tape on here. And then put our lining, and it doesn't matter which edge of our lining because it's all the same, against the back. So make sure it's lined up at the sides, like that. So what we're wanting to do now is just sew along there with our generous 6mm. Okay, so now we want to fold that back against that line, and we're wanting to fold on our first line. Now it's easy with my waxed canvas. This might be a little bit tricky. You might want to iron that in place. So we're just wanting to lift that so that we can fold it. So we've folded it back. We folded it on our first line, fold it back. What is easier is if you lift that, and see if I've got how much double-sided tape I've got left. Put some double-sided tape on the seam allowance. Not in here, so that just so that it holds it in place. No, it's not going to hold it in place because I'm trying to tape 2 layers of waxed canvas together, and that will not hold. We need to have our lining down at the back also. Now, if you're using fabric, you can iron. Sometimes it's easier to iron this before you sew it. So that seam has to be down flat. That's better. So now we shall go sew along that line. And that is our covered edge. But first we'll put our zipper pulls on. We're going to put one on from each end, so I shall put that end on first. And bring these right out so that you can bring it in from an angle. I see people struggling with it, and I sometimes think it's because they've got it too flat at the edge. Definitely bring it out on an angle. There it was. And from the other end, so you can see this side here is above that one, so that's the side I'm going to put in first. And definitely on an angle, till they're both the same, and push it down. Right, so bring them into the middle so they're not in your way. So what it's good to do here is just baste over the edge to keep everything in place. You can baste right around the edge if you wish, which I'll do now. So that's what you've got as a zipper panel. So remember, this is curved and that is flat. So now we want to retrieve our handle. So we've got that all marked up with the lines we had before. We want our 2 D-rings and we want to place the handle the right side up. So if you've got a definite right and wrong side, do it like that. So now we want to place that 6 mil away from the zipper edge. So we're taking it 6 mil or 1/4 of an inch away from that seam. So because we've done the covered zipper, I like to bring it in quite close to the edge. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hold it there, take off that piece of tape. Then we want to slide our D-rings on. We're going to slide one in between that like that. Actually, I wanted that the other way around. I want the seam, so I haven't got the seam on my handle, to be at the front. So from the front, you don't see the join, you just see the flat edge like that. And we're coming to that first line, remember? So what we want to do now is sew over that line. Now I start here, or start in the middle and back over a couple of times. Just flex that a little bit and then sew that. So this has got room to move. You don't want it tight. So you want to flex it slightly and then do the same on this. Sew that one, give it a little flex over your D-ring and sew that one. So that is what we've got for our handle. Now the reason I get you to sew through all the layers is for strength, because this is going to have the weight of your bag. And if you've just sewn through your top vinyl or your top fabric, it does run the risk of causing problems for your bag. So what we're going to do now, and this is purely optional, is put some rivets in here, 1/2 inch from the end. Now we're using we want to leave the last inch, so I'm going to come up 1.5 inches from that end. Now again, I'm going to put the rivets through all my layers because it's for strength. So now we want to take our gusset pieces and put those right sides together along the edge of our zipper panel. Now please always double check that you have put your zipper pulls on before you do this. So this should fit perfectly like you see it is here. But if you've taken a slightly different seam allowance, it may not. And that's not a problem. Whichever is bigger, just trim it to fit. It's not going to be a problem. So clip those, turn it over, and put your lining right sides together on the other side. And just put them into the clip. These clips take a bit of getting used to when you first use them because they feel so small, but they are such strong little clips. They're brilliant. Okay, so now we're just going to sew down both sides of that at the allotted seam allowance. Then we're going to open it up like we have our zipper and top stitch down each side. Now when we do that, this can be quite thick if you're on a domestic, so you might want to hand crank it or just take it through slowly as you can. So that is our gusset panel. Now I'm going to baste around these as well, and then we're going to mark all our centers. So that is our panel, any overhang in interfacing, I'm going to take off because I don't want that to affect my seam at the end. So what we're going to do now is attach this to our bag. So get our exterior and lining that we matched up before. Make sure that the back is facing towards the back and have it right sides together. So the back is there, the front is there. And line up that center right there and clip that together. Now I also like to put a clip on either side of that so that just it's going to hold it nicely. Bring that up and do the same at this side. So you're lining up the center with the center. Now, if you follow my channel, you know I like to put my binding in with my construction seam. But with this bag, I've actually, in this pattern, I've put fold over elastic binding. And so I'm putting that in last. So now we just want to come back to our middle, lift that up, find our middle there, and put a clip in there. And just one either side. Now the reason I'm just doing one either side is we need to do some snipping around everything, and it's easier to have it in place. Well, I find it easier to have it in place when you do that. So now just lift up your front and put that lining up your centers. Now just put the clips quite close because we want to snip right into here. The next thing we want to do is reach into here and make sure we've got that open a little bit. Now make sure any D-rings and things like that are completely out of the way. So because you've got a curve here, you want to snip around that bit. So we're going to snip from there. Now we're just going in little snips because don't forget our seam is only 6, just over a generous 6 or a generous 1/4 of an inch. Now if you're not too comfortable with snipping like this, you can put a little bit of tape on here at the 6mm mark so that you know where you need to snip to. And I think that's a brilliant idea. I've seen a couple of my testers do that. So then do the same on this side. I'm snipping on this side between there and there. A little bit far out. Then we want to come to the bottom, and as you can see here, this is the curve. So we're wanting to snip on this edge. So because we're sewing one way and one the other, we want to get our snips right. And the same on this edge. Now your seam is right there, so it's a little bit tricky to snip where your seam is. Okay, so now we're just going to start bringing that around like that and clip our way around. Now don't put your clips in any more than what your seam is, because if I put them right in here, it's going to start pulling it in and holding more than what I need at that point. And I just switch between the two. Like that. It needs another little snip there. I haven't snipped Oh yes, I have, I just can't see them. Now there may be some going back and forwards to get, nope, see that's going to fit perfectly at that point. But if you need to go back and forwards between the two, do that, but never move your center marks. If you start moving your center clips, your gusset is going to not be even on the bag. Pieces, start there, go around that curve and stop stitching. Do the same on that side and then turn it over so that these pieces are flat down, because if you're trying to sew it like that all the way around, you're going to get in the way of your machine and it makes it quite awkward. So start on a flat edge like that, down as low as you can, go right round, flip the bag over, do the same around that one like that, then stop stitching and flatten that down, start where you stopped and just do that bottom curve. And I promise you it will make a huge difference to how easy this is to sew, else it is quite difficult. So let's go sew that. Okay, so that's us all sewn on. So I'm going to just tidy up my seams. Now I don't cut my seams back as such, I just tidy up any overhanging pieces. If you've taken a bigger seam than the 1/4 inch or 6 mil, you may need to cut it down for your binding. But that may also cause puckering around the bag because it is designed to be just a generous 6 or 1/4 inch. So if you've got puckering on a gusseted bag, it could be that you have tried to change the seam allowance. That is the first thing I would look at, and then I would look at if there's any give in any of your fabrics, or if any of your gusset seam allowances and things have been changed when putting your zipper panels and things like that together. Because I assure you designers go to a big length to try and get their gusset to fit perfectly. And I also suggest turning your bag at your corners to check that you haven't got any puckering, because you can fix it now. It's going to be difficult to fix it once you put your binding on. So that's all I've cut off. As you see, I haven't actually cut my seam down. So I'm just going to check my corners. No, they all seem to be okay. Now you may see some stitching like that at this stage. Don't worry about that, because your binding, putting your binding on will give that a reinforcement stitch, and so you won't be able to see any of that when you've finished your next seams. I'll just check these corners. Okay, so there's no puckering on there. Right, so as I said, I am using fold over elastic on this pattern, just so that I'm showing different ways of doing binding, not just sticking with the same old binding. If you follow my pattern, you know I'm definitely a fan of cotton bias tape, and that will remain so. But let's be flexible and try something different. It appears I've only got the thin in the black, but that's okay, we can make it work. So what I'm going to do is do a test fit around the bag, and then I'm going to join it. So I'm going to join it at the top at the back, because that's going to be the place that you're not going to see much at all. So as you can see, I'm giving it a slight stretch. So if I turn it and sew it at that point, that will be fine. So I'm actually going to glue this on. You can do it however you want. I find it easier if it's actually glued as opposed to just trying to sew it randomly on. So I'm just going to run a bead of fabric glue. This is a bit old. It's Helmar fabric glue right on the edge of my and I'm just going to push it into the glue right at the edge of the seam. So it's actually just covering the seam. Fold it over and clip it in place for now. So now I'll just let that sit for a minute to dry, and we'll do the same. We'll sew around there from that side, and then turn it around that way and around there from that side, catching both sides. So there it is, all sewn. So what we're going to do now is turn it through. This is the fun bit. And it is quite an easy turn, but if you made it with thicker fabric, just go careful that you're not putting too much pressure on the bottom of your zips. Get your hand in there and give that a really good push out around your corners. Roll your seam a little bit. And inside we've got a slip pocket and our bigger, deeper pocket, which was almost like a divider. And that, if you've padded that, is ideal for the bigger size for an iPad or something. In the smaller size, it's great for a phone or something a little bit smaller. So let's do the strap. So I have made a double strap, as you can see, and I have just put a swivel hook and then ran it up through an adjustable slider. Now you can either have two on there or you can have one, and I'll show you how that works. So what I've done is I have folded that to the line like we do with a strap, just a single cut, so that's 2 inches folded in. Done the same with some contrast, but this is 1/4 of an inch thinner, and then I just sew that on there like that down at the sides. And that's how I make this contrast strap. So as you can see, all I've done is fold that, put a slider on it, feed a swivel, and then up. Now you can finish these how we normally do, but I quite like having them on the outside like that, and that's definitely not going to slip. So how do we attach that to the bag? So what we're going to do is get a loop like that. We're going to feed that down through the top. Now you want the loop like this that you want on the top. So I want that on top. Then we're just going to feed those through there. Actually, I want them the other way around, don't I? So I've twisted that and I didn't really want to. Right, and then we just pull that knot tight like that. You can level those up and just attach that to there. So that is our back strap. It can then come off and go on the top handles to be a crossbody. I actually really like this size as a crossbody. So let's have a look at the simple pack. So this is the simple, and it has got the covered zip like we have on the top, and you just make that exactly the same way as I showed for the zipper cover for the one I've just made. On the back, it has got our straps actually attached in here and the handle. So that's pretty basic. That's all in the pattern. Now there are so many different options with these. What I've done is I've added D-rings on the bottom, and I'm going to put adjustable sliders on both of these. So what I'm going to do is feed that up and down through there, but I'm going to leave a long loop. Feed it through my D-ring, back up on the far side of my loop, and put it back through the slide adjuster like that. And you want plenty of room so that you can bring this up here and either sew across there or put rivets in it. And then our strap just becomes a fixed strap like that. Now you can do the same pack setup on the standard pack. It doesn't just have to be on the simple, so you can do the same thing. And on the standard, you can also do 2 separate packs. So you could do the same sort of thing at the bottom here and have the swivels at the top. So have D-rings here and swivels that go into your D-ring if that's what you prefer. And then it would be a fixed strap. So that is our Pintly packs, our regular and our simple, and both of these are the regular size. So I hope you have as much fun making the Pintly as I have designing it.